Hi, I'm Joseph Noah. I'm a medical doctor and a biochemist, and I'm the author of Document X, Direct Evidence of God's Existence. Now let's look at the miracle concerning the birds. Now, I'm going to paraphrase here. Prophet Abraham wanted to know how God gives life to the dead. In chapter 2, verse 260, Abraham asked God how he gives life to the dead. Then God replies, "Do you not then believe?" Abram says, "Yes, I do, but to satisfy my heart and put me at ease." Then God instructs Abraham to take 4 birds and tame them to obey him, or teach them to obey his call. He should then separate these 4 birds into 4 portions and place a portion on each of 4 hills, and he should call those birds and they will come flying towards him, knowing that God is wise, all-powerful. Now, the fact that Abraham wanted to see how God controls life and death doesn't imply a lack of belief, because Abraham was a prophet and he had absolute trust in God's power. But Abraham was also a mortal. He was inquisitive how God exercises that control. Now, this is the traditional understanding. When Abraham asked God how he gives life to the dead, Abraham is instructed again to tame those birds, to teach them how to obey his call. Now comes a shocker. He must massacre those birds, cut them into pieces, into 4 pieces. And then, another absurdity, he must now divide this dead bird tissue into 4 portions. And he must carry this semi-liquid biological material up to the 4 hills, placed a portion on each of these hills. Then he must call them, and somehow these multiple bits and pieces of flesh, blood and bone would reassemble itself. The birds would be resuscitated, revived, and they would come flying to Abraham. This is the traditional understanding. Now, the first problem is, it's a cardinal principle of the Quran that once you die, whether you're an animal or a human being, that marks the end of physical existence. The second problem is, if God had intended for Abraham to massacre the birds and then revive them, why the unnecessary task of taming the bird first? And why the meaningless act of carrying the dead bird tissue up the hills? It would have served the purpose if God instructed Abraham to slaughter those birds at this particular site and then resuscitate those birds at the same site. It would have served as a miracle, and Abraham would have probably been impressed. The last problem is the gross misinterpretation of the Arabic word chopping up or slicing violently. It simply means to separate. Now, what is the moral of the story here? What is the message here? We know God instructed Abraham to train these birds, and this is what bird trainers are doing. They put these birds at a distance, on a branch or so, and train them and call them, and they will come flying towards the trainer. Abraham was instructed to do the same thing. Now, this is the moral of the story. If Abraham, which was a mortal, he was neither the creator of the birds nor the controller of their nature, if he could tame those birds to obey its call, could not God, who is the creator of the birds, the controller of their nature, the author of existence, could he not then control life and death? And this principle is elaborated in another verse which says, He causes the living to issue from the non-living, and He causes the non-living to issue from the living. And this refers to the ever-recurring cycle of life, death, and rebirth. When an organism lives, it dies, and it decays in accordance with the second law of thermodynamics into lifeless atoms. And these lifeless atoms then become the future raw material for new life. And this happens in the physical world and is governed by the physical laws of God. And this understanding can be extended to the rise and fall of nations. Nations that were previously powerful and subjugated other nations, when they defied the moral order, lived luxurious lifestyles, they fell into decline and were eventually destroyed and were finally then replaced by other nations which were previously subjugated and weak. So the moral of the story here is God has absolute control over life and death.